All right. Well, thank you all so much for tuning in. We're super excited about today's program. Before we get to introducing our special guest today from Sarah, thank you for joining this African American Chamber of Commerce of San Antonio webinar, where we bring you special guests from around the community and abroad to give us a little bit more insight about what they do and offerings that they have that we can get engaged in as members of the chamber, and also how we can support the local economy as well. And so I'm Xavier Tosin, chairman of the chamber. Excited to be with you all on this Friday. I hope everyone had a great week. And if you're tuning in later on, if you have any questions, feel free to email us at info@africanamericanchambersa.org or visit our website at www.africanamericanchambersa.org. Today, we have some special guests from Sarah. And Sarah is the lead Continuum of Care agency for San Antonio and Bexar County. So I will introduce now Miss Katie Vila. Hi, Katie. How's it going?
Hi, going really well. Very excited to be here.
Awesome deal. Awesome deal. Happy to have you here. So if you don't mind, just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit more about Sarah. Then I guess we'll go into presentation.
Sure, that sounds great. So I'm Katie Vela. I'm the executive director of SARA, the South Alamo Regional Alliance for the Homeless. This organization has existed with a staff as a nonprofit for about 6 years now. I've worked there since almost the beginning, but I've only been the executive director since October, so almost a year now. But I've worked in this field for the last 9 years or so, looking at data around homelessness, policymaking, funding. So I'm really excited to explain more today about the role SARA has in San Antonio and Bexar County in addressing homelessness.
Awesome. We look forward to it. The show is yours. Thank you so much for presenting.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So this, we call it Homelessness 101 because we give kind of an overview of not just SARA, but some about the landscape of homelessness and the different partners involved in San Antonio and Bexar County. So just to get started with SARA, we're what's called the Continuum of Care lead agency. And so we're a nonprofit, a 501c3, but we also have a designated role from the Department of Housing and Urban Development, the federal department HUD, to facilitate funding and planning around homelessness for San Antonio and Bexar County. So that's what that role really means. Our mission is to ensure that everyone has a place to call home in San Antonio and Bexar County. That's what we're driven to do. That's what inspires us every day and keeps us motivated in this work, is that we believe that everyone can have housing and can be successful in housing with the right supports and the right coordination. So a little bit more about what we do. We really work to maximize and align funding. So we facilitate a funding process for about $12.5 million annually that funds different housing and services for homelessness. I'll talk a little bit more about what that looks like and how to apply if you're an interested nonprofit partner. We also collect and report and analyze data. So I'll talk more about our point in time count and how we capture how many people are experiencing homelessness and how we measure our success to see if we're making progress. We've also really over the last year taken on a larger role in local advocacy and awareness. We want to connect with the community and for people to engage in the system-wide work that's happening. We know a lot of people are interested and want to help to solve this difficult problem, and we want to plug them into the work that's happening with our partners. Along those lines, we also coordinate with our partners. So we facilitate different committees and work groups to tackle different issues and come up with community-wide policies for how we'll move forward together. We operate what's called a coordinated entry system. So this is basically a common assessment that all of our partners use so that when you approach a service provider in need of help, you can get connected to all of the different resources available, not just what's there on site. So that's been a really transformative process for our partners to make sure the most vulnerable people get connected quickly to the right service and that everyone's on the same page about that. And then we're constantly identifying new gaps and figuring out ways to pilot initiatives to address them. So when you think of Sarah and our role, we're not there to provide direct service. We're really there to connect the dots across the community to address homelessness in a more systemic way. And so these are kind of our anchors for all of the decisions that we make at Sarah. So first we look at, is this a sustainable change and a financially viable initiative? So we're really in the business of long-term outcomes. We don't want quick fixes, although sometimes we need them. We want to really address the deeper issues. We also look at, is this going to make a measurable impact? Is it something that we can say we've made progress in a concrete way? And then the third, and something that is really core to our mission and our beliefs, is have we been inclusive in our collaboration? And I think this session today is a great step. We want to engage with all different communities across San Antonio and make sure everyone's aware of the work that we're doing and can get connected to it. And also to make sure that if we're making decisions, we've included the people that will be impacted. So I'll talk more about how we engage with people with lived experience of homelessness to make sure we're making good policy decisions. And so when we're talking about homelessness, it might be helpful to know that it can look a lot of different ways in our community. So these are HUD's definitions for homelessness, and they can impact what services you qualify for. But it can be helpful to be familiar with these to understand what resources are out there. And so we look at literal homelessness. So this is people who are living outside. They don't have a safe place, an adequate nighttime residence. They might be in a car, under a bridge, or in a shelter. We also have programs that we coordinate with that are for people at imminent risk of homelessness. So this is a group who may have an eviction notice, within 21 days of not having housing, and is expected to not have housing in the near future. So we also have upstream strategies that we're looking at. Category 3, this is has historically been the hardest to address for us as a community, but it's still a very large problem, which is people who are doubled up in housing and may not have enough space to either meet their lease requirements or just to live comfortably, or maybe are couch surfing with different people. And so we have some strategies around this, especially for young adults under the age of 25. And then it's important to note that we also consider people who are actively fleeing a violent situation, domestic violence, to qualify for our homelessness program. So if someone's in an unsafe situation, they can get connected to resources through the homeless service providers. And so I mentioned HomeLink, or coordinated entry. So this is actually a HUD mandate for all of their funds, that you have to create a coordinated system to connect people to housing. And so when we look at this, we're looking at 4 kind of different key components. So one is access. Does everyone in our community know how to access housing and homeless services? So we address this through coordination of street outreach, creating coordinated hotlines or processes across different agencies. We ensure that there's a common assessment and that we're prioritizing based on vulnerability. So although we want to have a quick response, we've seen that historically the same groups have been left behind. It tends to be people who can't advocate for themselves, might have more difficult challenges to returning to housing. And through this system, we've actually kind of turned it on its head and said, we want to prioritize people who absolutely need supportive housing, and without it are at risk of really illness and death if they stay on the street. And then we process referrals out to all of the agencies. And so we're constantly refining and tweaking this coordinated system called HomeLink. And we have a monthly committee meeting with all of our partners to talk about how we can improve this system and make it better. Another huge area of focus for us is making sure the community knows about HomeLink. What are the different access points where I can get connected to the services? And so that's been a big focus of ours as well. Now, just to talk a little bit about the funding I mentioned, you can see that since Sarah started playing this part as the COC lead agency, we've seen a huge increase in our funding from HUD. And this is because we're able to show how much we're coordinating across San Antonio and Bexar County. And so our current funding level from HUD is $12.6 million. And you can see below some of the interventions that are funded. So we fund permanent supportive housing, which this can be an apartment, tiny homes, a site-based housing with services on site. It can also be long-term rental assistance with a case manager visiting people in their home. And so this is a really critical intervention for people with co-occurring mental health and substance use, intellectual disabilities, physical disabilities that may make it difficult to afford a market rate unit. And so this is an area where we're constantly focusing on how can we grow our stock of permanent supportive housing. Rapid rehousing is kind of what it sounds like. We connect people quickly back into a housing situation and provide rental assistance and case management for up to 2 years. And then we have transitional housing, which this is typically a 2-year program where people can work on saving and income growth and education, employment. So we also fund programs in this area. And then you'll see we have a joint option where the person that's getting the services has the choice between transitional or permanent housing. That's that joint TH to RRH. We do fund some street outreach specifically for youth and young adults. And then this fund also helps with our planning and our data system that we use locally, the homeless management information system. So we think it's really important to not only fund the housing interventions, but also staff that can coordinate all of this so we can really maximize the work that we do. And so this is very timely because this competition is currently open. So if you are a nonprofit that might be interested in learning more about applying for these funds and operating a program in San Antonio or Bexar County, we currently have about $667,000 available to create new permanent supportive housing or rapid rehousing programs. So the application process opened a couple of weeks ago. They're due on September 27th at 12 o'clock. We have lots of resources available on our website and a recorded bidders conference that goes over all of the details. We also have a domestic violence bonus available for about $2 million, and this can be used for rapid rehousing or transitional to rapid rehousing, specifically for people who are fleeing domestic violence. And so if you're interested in this, check out our website. You can also reach out to us and we'll be sure to share our contact information. And if not this year, because of the deadline, I also think it's great to get engaged now with us. And start thinking about, is this something you'd like to do in the future to get everything in place so that you can operate a HUD grant? So we hope we can connect more with you about the funding that's available. And this is typically on an annual basis. So these are some of the priorities for this current funding opportunity, so you can start exploring all of it. We're focused on ending homelessness. Housing first is a priority for HUD. So this is basically an approach where there aren't preconditions to housing, and that, someone can go into housing and then begin to work on other issues that will help them become sustainable. They don't have to participate in certain programs to earn housing. It's really that connection happens as quickly as possible. It's really focused on reducing unsheltered homelessness, improving how we perform as a system. So when you're coordinated with Sarah and Sarah's funding, it's important to see how your program connects to the larger system and what kind of niche and role you play within that broad system and all of the needs that are out there. They're also offering additional points through this competition if you partner with housing authorities or healthcare organizations, because they've seen that can be really critical in a good program. They also are asking that every agency and Sarah as the COC center racial equity in all of the work we do. So this is in program design, how you evaluate your program to make sure that you're not perpetuating issues, systemic issues with racism in your programs. And finally, lived experience. So it's actually a requirement if you get these funds from HUD that you have someone who's experienced homelessness involved in your policy making as an organization. They also broadly in SARA, we have people who have experienced homelessness on our committees, on our board of directors, because what we've seen is that if we make decisions and programs in a vacuum without asking what really worked, people are an expert in their own lives and experiences. And so we want to bring them to the forefront in policy making, and we encourage all of our partners that we fund to do that as well. So along those lines, we also have a special program in addition to the COC funding. It's called the Youth Homelessness Demonstration Program. And so this was a special opportunity we had to apply for funding a couple of years ago, and we were awarded $6.88 million over 2 years. In order to better address youth and young adult homelessness. So we went through a planning process as a community, including a youth action board that still exists today and meets every 2 weeks. It's all made up of young adults who have at least 2/3 have experienced homelessness. And so we thought it was important to have a comprehensive planning process for what we wanted to do. And then we used that to decide which agencies we'd fund. So you can see a quick list here of the different partners that are currently funded. And this is funding that may be available again in the future. And so just a little bit more about our Youth Action Board. They are kind of a separate agency that has their own goals and mission, but Sarah has a liaison who helps to support their meetings and kind of the structure behind it. We pay stipends of $30 an hour for all meetings, and also anytime we ask them to participate in any other activities. And so that's something we're really proud of and has been seen as a model both locally and nationally for how you can really do this work. I also wanted to mention the point in time count. So this is one of several reports that we work on an annual basis that you may have heard of and maybe even volunteered for. So it occurs every year during the last 10 days of January, and that's at a national level that every community is doing a point in time count. So we actually deploy volunteer teams out and survey and hand out goodie bags and necessary items. And we use that to create a comprehensive report of how many people are experiencing homelessness and what their needs are. We also do a similar count for all of our shelters, so we can see year over year how many people are unsheltered, are in shelter, and what do those demographics look like? Are we addressing people who have experienced chronic homelessness, been homeless several times over years? So it gives us really good insights, and it's also used by the city, the county, and other funders to better target their funds to address homelessness in our region. So you can just see here quickly what our point in time count numbers look like. So this is a one-night snapshot, and we didn't conduct the count in 2021 due to COVID-19 and not wanting to put people who are unsheltered or our volunteers at risk. But you can see that it's remained fairly flat, which I think is a success because we've seen population growth across San Antonio and Bexar County. But this is definitely something we want to watch closely as we see the impacts of COVID-19 of people who have lost their jobs, running out of unemployment. And so we're constantly looking at strategies to get ahead of what we expect to see in the future. And so here's just a bit more. And since we didn't do our normal volunteer teams for our unsheltered count, what we did instead was we pulled a year of data out of our homeless management information system. Our street outreach staff collects information. And so we were able to put together a report. And last year, there were about 2,000 people in San Antonio and Bexar County who experienced unsheltered homelessness. And you can see some of the demographic trends. I think it's important to highlight that 22% were Black or African American. So we're seeing that there was an overrepresentation in homelessness compared to our census data for San Antonio and our general population. So this tells us that we still have work to do in that area. Also, 71% reported a mental health concern, and this is just who reported it. So again, this informs us that we need to be looking at treatment options, counseling, getting people connected to supportive services to be successful in housing. And so this next slide shows you what our system performance measures are. So this is another report that we do on an annual basis to track how we're doing at addressing homelessness. So you can see here, we look at how long are people experiencing homelessness in our community. We don't want people languishing out on the street when they can be connected. So we track that as an important measure. We also look at, are people able to maintain their housing, especially once the rental assistance ends? So we look closely at returns to homelessness or recidivism. We also include our point in time count. We look at income growth. It could be from employment or from benefit income, but we think that's an important part, of course, of sustaining housing. So look at strategies around that. We look at how many people are becoming homeless for the first time. This can be the hardest one to predict and address, but we've really been focusing on upstream strategies to keep people in their housing. And then just to highlight measure 7, we're also just looking at connecting people to permanent housing once they've experienced homelessness. And so that was a little bit about our reports, but I wanted to make sure we talked about how to access all of these different services. So you can see here, there's a QR code. We've actually created some luggage tags and business cards with this code. So if our volunteers are out there and they need to quickly look up the resources, they can. There have been some changes month to month because of COVID in different agencies' operations and their hours. So we link it back to a page on our website, so we always have the most up-to-date information. But you can see here that if someone you know or you need to share this resource, you can see where you can go to get the HomeLink assessment to get people connected to these housing options, with Haven for Hope being one of our largest access points, but we also have them through American GI Forum, SA Hope Center, Roy Moss, and St. Vincent de Paul. And we also now knew, because of COVID, as this started, but it's something we're continuing to do. The city also launched a Homeless Connections hotline. So if that's an easier option, you can call in Monday through Friday. And then we have a hotline specifically for people fleeing domestic violence. You can see that St. Vincent de Paul operates. So this is important to us, that we have access points, and we will continue to work on having them geographically throughout the community and making sure they're as easy as possible to access. If you would like to request assistance from a street outreach team member, these are some options you can call. Again, the Homeless Connections hotline through the city. You can also get access to street outreach through 311. There's also an email here that you can use. So this is a common question we get, is if I see someone who looks like they're in distress or in need, who's unsheltered, what do I do? So this is something concrete that you can do as a next step to make sure someone gets connected. And then this has been a huge focus for San Antonio over the last year, which is keeping people housed who are behind on rent. And so we've done a lot to coordinate with our partners because we had several programs that were providing prevention and rental assistance, but they couldn't necessarily see who had already been helped. There was no way of coordinating across agencies. So we now have a work group that meets every single week to talk through any challenges, but we'd recommend the city's emergency housing assistance program, which there's a link here. You can also call. But by going through that access point, you can get connected also to other partners if you don't qualify for the city's program. So that's a great resource, as well as San Antonio Community Resource Directory, or SACRED. That can be a great general directory to see for all different needs where to go. And you can enter a zip code and see also what's in your area. So that's a great resource, and they're constantly keeping that updated. Also wanted to mention, if you haven't read about this before, that our community created a 5-year homeless strategic plan. So this was a partnership with the city's Department of Human Services and many of our different service providers to create a plan so that we're really aligning the work and addressing areas and moving the needle. So these are the 6 key recommendations, but you're welcome to visit our website to read more about this plan. To increase a focus on consumer engagement and equity, expand street outreach teams and improve that coordination, to tailor interventions for the unsheltered population, to make sure there's a collective leadership group, which is really Sarah, the city, and some other key partners meeting to make sure that there's alignment, because that just makes us so much more effective in the work that we do. Developing more service-enriched housing. So again, having the services on site. And then doing further analysis on high utilizers of hospital and ER services to see if housing can help to address some of those issues and expenses that we see on the healthcare side by offering someone a safe place to live. Another major initiative you can read about on our social media and website is collectively with all of our partners, we've set a goal. We're calling it our housing surge, to house 500 people experiencing homelessness by the end of this year. And so this is really the culmination of the work that we already do, but we wanted to have a goal and regular check-ins so that we could see how can we be more efficient? What challenges are we running into? Are you able to get someone an ID quickly? Are you able to find a unit for, let's say, a large family that needs 4 bedrooms? Finding out what properties take a Section 8 voucher. So it's really just a concentrated effort to continue to check in to see what we need to do to meet this goal. So we're about a month into the challenge. We've housed 87 people, but we've also issued a lot of vouchers, and there are a lot of people in the process right now of looking for housing. So we expect to see that to continue to pick up. And here are some other opportunities to get involved with us. So there's many different ways. It could be engaging in one of our work groups, helping with our point in time count, just learning about the resources and becoming an expert so you can help someone in need, because we know sometimes it can be difficult to navigate all that's out there, and it's a constant work in progress, but we want to make it as clear and simple as possible. So that's what we're always striving for. We also have the Big Give coming up next Thursday, which can be a great opportunity to learn about Sarah, but also other homeless service providers and the work that they do. We have Hunger and Homeless Awareness Week coming up in November, and we typically put together a calendar of different events to bring awareness. So if this is something you're interested in, maybe holding a drive or an event, we can definitely meet to create a calendar and work together on that. And then another important touch point is every 2 weeks we have what's called a community collaboration call. We started doing this when COVID-19 first hit, because there were just so many questions about how do I keep people safe, and what's the latest CDC guidance, and what changes are happening at each agency. So this is a good touch point if you are providing services to just see what's happening in the community. And then of course the point in time count, that event I mentioned, we are planning to do it. We may have to alter it a bit from what we typically do, but that'll be on January 25th in 2022. And so we have there also our volunteer interest form. And so here's our contact information. If you're interested in learning more about the grant aspect and applying for funds, we have a specific grants email that you can contact to get connected with our policy and planning team. And then Billy Mahone, who's joining on the call as well, he's our director of community engagement, and he's a great person to get in touch with to find out more about where you can plug in to be part of this work. Because what we found is that many people are interested in addressing homelessness, but it can be hard to know where to start. And also, if you're wanting to provide a service, it can be really helpful to find out who else is already doing this work that you could partner with or learn from, so that we're really all working together. Because ultimately, that's what we believe, is that no one agency alone can tackle this. It comes from systems change and collaboration and long-term planning to really get there. So that's all I have as far as my presentation, but I am happy to answer any questions from the group.
Well, first off, thank you so much for that very robust presentation. It really is very insightful, very informative about what's happening in our community. I saw some glaring numbers that stuck out: 22% African American. That's a big number. My first question to you is just my own, and I'm just curious, how much support does Sarah get from the small business community? And you don't have to say percentage, but is it enough? And would you like to see more support from the small business community?
That's a great question. So Sarah is fortunate in that we have some planning dollars that we get from HUD to do this work for our region. But I will say we've needed to, look for additional funds as different issues emerge that we're wanting to solve. So an example is last year we saw that our shelters were having to social distance and didn't have the same capacity, that there were people that were in need of shelter. So we worked with USAA on an application and got funding for what we call diversion assistance. So it's basically a flexible fund where if you go to any of our access points and there's an option to quickly reconnect you to housing, whether it be with a family member or by paying a quick bill that would make a difference and give you a permanent place to stay, that's something we've taken on to make available to our partner agencies. So they just have some flexibility to solve problems, and it keeps people from having to enter shelter in the first place. And so that's helped about 150 people over the last year. And we'll do that from time to time as we see a big gap. We'll go out and ask for funds to operate a new program to help our partners. So to answer your question, I'd say this is a great opportunity for us to think about how we can engage more with small business on a program like that or to solve a new problem.
Great deal. Thank you so much. And I want to welcome LJ Lawana. She's with the African American Chamber Procurement Committee. And hey, LJ, thank you for joining.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me. Katie, wonderful presentation. Again, to Xavier's point about the 22% disproportionality there as it relates to African Americans experiencing homelessness. I was curious if you can talk a little bit more about, why do you think that number has been increasing? Are these individuals, are they native to San Antonio? Are they, moving here from different places? How long have they been in the city? Are they experiencing joblessness as well? What are some of the intersections as it relates to that number?
Yeah, so I think there are, and thank you so much, Lawana, for inviting me to do this presentation and meet with you all. So I think there are questions and answers to what you just posed. So I think for one point I want to make is that street outreach coordination and capturing data is something we've been working hard on over the last year. The city has been working to hire more street outreach staff. I think now they're sitting at about 12. That's a brand new team. And before that, we were seeing that there were only about one street outreach staff person for every 150 people on the street. So even just starting to dig in and getting kind of that collective look at those data points of the causes and issues behind homelessness is still something that we're actively working on. We have done a couple of simple analysis projects looking at racial equity. And one thing that we saw was that there wasn't a disparity when you looked at who was accessing shelter. There didn't seem to be an issue when we reviewed that, but we were seeing issues once it came to the point of housing and maintaining housing. And so I think that what happens after the rental assistance or with the housing provider, that's something we have to continue to explore. I'll also say, I mentioned that we have an assessment tool that we use to prioritize housing. Right now we're using a tool. It has this crazy long name, but the acronym is the VI-SPDAT. And it's a national tool that's used by many different communities to assess vulnerability. And it's really based on how likely are you to die on the street if not for getting housing. But what we've started to see in our data and nationally is that we think there are some disparities in the tool itself. Because, for example, one of the vulnerability questions has to do with accessing ER and healthcare services. But we're seeing that Black or African American clients have not been as likely to access healthcare and therefore don't get the vulnerability point. So something else that we're working on is a research study with the Lab of Economic Opportunity with Notre Dame to create a new tool that centers racial equity. So it's not one of those tasks we can do one day to the next. We want to be really deliberate with creating this new tool But we should be rolling that out in the next 6 months to test it and see if it like helps us to not see that same disparity. So yeah, happy to answer any more questions, but I think we still have some questions too in this area to see how we can do better.
Excellent, excellent. Just if there are any questions in the audience, please feel free to post it in the chat. Again, we're super excited to have Sarah with us today, and thank you so much, Katie, for presenting and giving us, great information. I think the organization is doing great work in the community. We need it. Our slogan is "We're stronger together," and we really believe in that. And so we're trying to create that rapport with organizations that we can align ourselves with to impact the local community, especially the African American community as well. And so we're excited to see that San Antonio has an organization such as Sarah involved in doing the real work to keep people from being homeless. I understand that are you familiar with a global initiative to basically eliminate homelessness? I think I just saw something from the Melinda and Bill Gates Foundation in that regard. So having all of those different entities kind of intertwined and focused on this work, and also for us to really understand as a business support system how we can intertwine our businesses in it to really help you all, but help African Americans as well. That 22%, we got to get that down ASAP. So I look forward to myself, at least joining on that PIT deal January 25th. That's the day after my birthday. So I'll see if I can make that happen, and just supporting where we can. So I just appreciate you. Let's see.
That would be wonderful. And yeah, and I guess if there's feedback for me too on what are we missing, what are we not talking about that we need to be, it's a great time for us as an organization because we're working on our strategic plan for the next 3 years and having these conversations. So I'd love any feedback too on what are we not talking about or what are we missing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much. We
Just to jump in, one last question. The notice of funding opportunity. I noticed the NOFA, we had a funding priority there that was specific to racial equity, Katie, and I was so excited. I gotta lie, I saw that and my face just lit up. Can you talk more about what that looks like on the ground? Tactically speaking, are we saying that our housing programs need to, have a specific framework that they're operating out of? Can you talk more about that?
Yeah, so I think when you look at the actual application, when you apply, it'll ask questions about the diversity of your organization and your board. It'll also be like, they'll have to describe as part of the process, what are you doing to center racial equity in your program? And then it's something we'll hold them accountable to. So I'd say that might be an area of growth for us to have more of a framework. But right now, at least it's there as a requirement that they take a look at that and develop a plan for how they'll do it.
Awesome deal. Awesome. Any other questions? Just going to scan the room real quick just to see if there's any. If you have any questions, email grants. If you have any questions about NOFO specifically, email grants@sarahhomeless.org. Again, any questions about NOFO, email grants@sarahhomeless.org. And so again, thank you so much for joining us today. We look forward to having you back with an update in the near future. And also in the meantime, we look forward to bridging those gaps between, our chamber and Sarah, and seeing how we can benefit and support what's going on in regards to homelessness within the community. Again, we're stronger together. Thank you so much, Katie. We'll go ahead and make a few announcements, and we'll chat with you on the back end. All right. So again, thank you so much for joining today's Meet and Learn with the African American Chamber of Commerce. Today we had Sarah, and they provided us with some robust information that they're doing to support the homelessness population here in San Antonio. Just because we operate in the business aspect, as you know, everything ties right back to economics. And so the stronger that we are in our businesses, the better that we can be able to support the local community and help organizations like Sarah by way of funding, volunteering, et cetera. And so just super happy to have with us today. Again, today is September the 17th. Do you have your AACC membership? If not, guess what? Membership's only $75 a year. For most businesses, meaning if you have between 1 and 5 employees, it's only $75 for the entire year. And so we would love to have you join us. We would love to work with you, network with you, and promote your business, and also advocate on behalf of your business as well. And so if you're asking what a chamber can do for you, ask what you can do for the chamber, and I guarantee what we do for you will come back tenfold. So thank you so much for joining us today, and we'll see you on the next Meet and Learn. Take care.